Imagine you're somewhere, maybe a big diplomatic event, or maybe just, trying to keep the peace at a family dinner. And there's always that one person, right? The one who just seems to glide. They handle conversation so smoothly with this effortless grace. Like they always have a smart comment ready, but it never feels forced. And they have this polish, this refinement that somehow makes everyone else feel comfortable, feel genuinely listened to. It's more than just being polite. It's something richer. Today on the Deep Dive, we're tackling just one word, but it's a fascinating one. Urbane. What does urbane actually mean? If you look it up, say, in Merriam-Webster, the main definition is pretty straightforward. Notably polite or polished in manner. And they add a bit more, like showing a high degree of refinement and sophistication in manner, suave and polished.
Yeah.
But I think the key part, the bit that really clicks for me, is the social aspect. It says, courteous and elegant in a way that makes social interaction pleasant and effortless.
Right.
It's about putting others at ease, isn't it? Not that stiff, formal politeness, but a kind of fluid grace.
Exactly. It's that blend. It's polish, yes, but it's combined with a genuine warmth. You often hear phrases like cosmopolitan manners or polished urbanity connected to it. An urbane person can, walk into a room, sort of read the vibe and just navigate it all with such grace and poise. They don't just fit in. They somehow elevate the whole interaction. It's like they have this intuitive social intelligence.
Yeah.
They can handle awkward moments or tricky conversations with a kind of lightness that makes everyone feel comfortable, feel included, not, sized up or judged. It's definitely more than just knowing which fork to use at dinner. It's about really understanding human connection, I think. I remember seeing a speaker once, totally new to the audience, and they managed to win over this really skeptical crowd, not with big dramatic gestures, but just with this urbane mix of wit, real curiosity about the questions people asked, and this quiet confidence. It made everyone feel like they were part of the smart, engaging conversation. That, for me, is urbane in action.
That's a perfect example. It really brings it to life. And, it makes me think about the sound of the word itself, urbane. It sounds so much like urban. I mean, as a listener, you must be wondering, are they related? Or is that just like a coincidence in how they sound? Seems like there has to be a connection.
Oh, absolutely. No coincidence at all. They're deeply connected. It's actually a great example of how language can sort of fossilize old beliefs from society. Both words, urbane and urban, they come from the exact same Latin root, urbanus.
Okay.
And urbanus itself comes from the Latin word urbs, which simply means
city.
City, exactly.
Yeah. So wait, does that mean originally urbane just meant the same thing as urban? Like anything to do with a city? That's a huge difference from how we use it now.
That's absolutely right. If you go back, say, to the mid-1500s, and specifically for urbane, its first recorded use like this was around 1623. Back then, urbane basically meant the same as urban, anything related to a city or town. But here's the really interesting part, the bit that shows you how language reflects culture. The modern meaning of urbane, sophisticated, polished, refined, that developed from this very specific, widely held belief.
Okay, what belief was that?
Well, it was this idea, often pushed pretty hard by city folks themselves, that living in the city actually made you more suave, more cultivated, more refined than people living out in the country.
Huh. So the city wasn't just a place, it was like the ultimate finishing school. They basically thought, you can't get this kind of sophistication down on the farm.
That's pretty much it. It was a really strong cultural idea. Cities were the hubs, right? Trade, learning, art, fashion, diplomacy, it all happened there. You had people from all sorts of backgrounds mixing, which meant you needed more sophisticated ways to interact socially.
Right, more complex social navigation.
Exactly. Whereas rural life, maybe seen as simpler, maybe more wholesome, was also often linked with being less exposed, maybe a bit provincial. So this led to this association, sometimes conscious, sometimes not, between city life and refined life. And by the 1800s, the two words had clearly split in meaning and spelling. Urban stuck with describing the city itself or city life characteristics.
And urbane got the fancy manners meaning.
Precisely. Urbane became specifically about those refined, polished manners that cultivated social skill. So the really fascinating takeaway from all that etymology is that the word urbane itself kind of carries this echo of an old cultural bias, this historical idea that sophistication was basically born in the city. It's baked right into the language.
That's genuinely fascinating, how words aren't just labels, they carry history and even old prejudices. So speaking of history, let's trace that idea of urbanity through time. It goes way back, doesn't it? Like to classical Rome.
Oh, absolutely. The Romans were definitely thinking about this stuff. You look at Roman writers like Cicero is the big name here. They talked about something called urbanitas. And for them, it wasn't just being polite. It was tied to wit, to eloquence, to really cultured behavior.
Ah, okay. So urbanitas.
Yeah, urbanitas. It was seen as a key quality of the sophisticated Roman citizen. It showed off their intelligence and their social skill, especially in the city environment. Cicero himself was apparently famous for his his ability to make sharp, witty points in court or debates, but always with this underlying elegance and smarts. It was about using language skillfully to charm, to persuade, maybe even to gently tease, but always staying within the bounds of good taste.
So it's more than just surface level politeness. It's almost like a performance of intellect and social ease. And it sounds like that ideal just got stronger over the centuries.
It really did. Fast forward to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment in Europe. Urbane really comes into its own then as a sign of someone well-educated and socially graceful. And this was often tied very closely to the ideals of the European aristocracy. They were expected to be cultivated in arts, in conversation, in diplomacy.
Right, like Castiglione's The Courtier, that book outlining the perfect gentleman.
Exactly like that. A lot of the qualities described there, that effortless grace, that sprezzatura or studied nonchalance, the wit, the ability to handle tricky social stuff with poise, that's basically the blueprint for being urbane. By the 18th century, the word pretty much meant what it means to us today, describing someone who is courteous, yes, but also deeply refined and socially skilled. What's really compelling, I think, is how Urbane has consistently mirrored and maybe even reinforced society's ideals about civility, good manners, and intellectual polish through all these different eras. It's a quality that keeps showing up.
Yeah, it adapts.
It adapts. And even now, you see it used to describe, say, charismatic public figures, maybe a diplomat who just smoothly calms down a tense situation, or those really suave fictional characters. I saw in the sources someone even described a version of Hannibal Lecter as suave and sophisticated, which is, it's an interesting use of urbane, maybe a bit chilling.
Uh-huh. That's definitely memorable, if a little dark.
Okay,
So we have the definition, we've traced the history, but what does being urbane actually look like? Can you give us some concrete examples from the sources, things that really show this quality in action? I remember seeing some really vivid descriptions.
Oh, definitely. The sources are full of them. You see it describing people naturally, like a tall, urbane man with a zigzag nose that paints a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Or sassy, smart, urbane, and flippant Lance Loud. Then there's a dignified man with urbane manners. Even Hugh Hefner gets described as the carefree, urbane man about town. And in that more classic sense, you get descriptions like a gentlemanly and urbane host, the kind of person who makes everyone feel completely welcome and comfortable no matter who they are.
Right. And it's not just limited to describing people, is it? I noticed it can apply to things too, like a style or an approach or even just an overall vibe. That's where it gets really broad.
That's a really sharp point, and it shows how versatile the word is. It definitely goes beyond just how a person behaves. It can describe a whole quality of sophistication. So the sources mention dialogue that's witty and urbane, meaning it's clever, it's polished, maybe subtly humorous, not just laugh out loud funny.
Okay.
In fashion, you might read, the silhouettes were urbane. That suggests, elegant, clean lines, maybe timeless rather than just trendy. Or a design being crisp and urbane like minimalist architecture, but with a certain warmth. There was even mention of urbane pop music.
Urbane pop, what would that be like?
Well, I guess it suggests music that's sophisticated, maybe with smart lyrics or complex layers in the sound, something that feels culturally aware, not just simple pop. It can evoke an urbane aesthetic, a refined, worldly style, or even a richly urbane gray palette in home decor, suggesting understated luxury. And like you said, an approach. An urbane interview style, or urbane diplomacy, points to someone being measured, respectful, thoughtful, and ultimately very effective. So the big picture here is that urbane suggests this smart, subtle polish, whether it's in a person, a piece of art, or even a way of negotiating.
That makes sense. So building on those examples, maybe we can sharpen the focus even more by looking at synonyms, words that mean basically the same thing, and also antonyms, words that mean the opposite.
Yeah.
What words really capture urbane?
Okay, yeah. If you're looking for synonyms, words that really get close, you'd find things like suave, sophisticated, polished, refined, debonair, genteel, cultured, cosmopolitan, well-mannered, courteous.
Right, a lot of those overlap.
They do, and they all tend to imply, as one source put it, high cultivation and poise coming from wide social experience. It's about being worldly, comfortable in different situations, having this easy confidence, but without being arrogant. You're not easily thrown off balance.
Okay, so what's the flip side? What does it look like to not be urbane? What are the antonyms?
Right, the antonyms really help define it by contrast. You'd see words like rude, uncouth, crude, unsophisticated, boorish, provincial, abrasive, unrefined, or even rustic.
Rustic, interesting. Linking back to that city-country idea.
Exactly, it still carries that echo. So it begs the question, what makes someone not urbane? Usually it's a lack of that polish, that social awareness, maybe that worldliness. Someone who maybe talks too loudly, interrupts constantly, only talks about themselves, or just seems completely oblivious to the social cues around them that would be the opposite of urbane.
Got it. Okay, so let's bring this into today. Why are we even talking about urbane in, well, 2025? It feels like a word maybe from your grandfather's time or even earlier, like the 18th century you mentioned. But it's obviously still around. People use it in books and articles, even talking about fashion, to describe that kind of polished character. So why does it stick around? Why is it still relevant?
That's a really important question. And I think the answer speaks to the fact that the qualities Urbane describes are pretty timeless, even if the word sounds a bit old-fashioned to some. Think about our world now. It's increasingly globalized, right? We're constantly interacting across cultures, whether it's for work, travel, or just in our own neighborhoods.
True.
In those situations, things like politeness, refinement, being able to understand different perspectives, showing genuine empathy, they aren't just nice to haves, they're incredibly valuable. They help build connections, avoid misunderstandings.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in professional settings, I imagine. An urbane approach must be really useful.
Oh, absolutely instrumental. Think about diplomacy or high-level business deals, or even just leading a team with diverse members. Being respectful, tactful, communicating clearly and eloquently, these things can make or break a situation. An urbane leader isn't just a smooth talker. They listen well, they get the nuances, they can explain complicated things in a way that makes sense and makes people feel heard. That fosters collaboration, not arguments. They kind of lead by example through their interactions.
Yeah, and you definitely notice it when you see public figures who manage to be urbane. They stand out, especially now when so much public discussion can feel, well, abrasive. Their poise feels different.
Exactly. They really do stand out for being thoughtful, tactful, and genuinely engaged. It's a reminder that respectful interaction is possible and effective. So yeah, while the word urbane might have a certain vintage charm, the qualities it represents, that cultivated grace, poise, social skill, are arguably more essential than ever for navigating our complex world. And that includes the online world too, which adds another layer. How do you come across as urbane in an email or a chat?
Oh, that's a challenge.
It really is. Without your tone of voice or facial expressions conveying that warmth and refinement through just text, it requires even more care, more precision with your words.
So we've really taken urbane apart today. We went from its roots, meaning literally of the city, all the way to how it now describes this sophisticated, polished, courteous way of being that really has nothing to do with where you live anymore. It's about a certain cultivated charm.
Right.
An elegance in how you deal with people.
Yeah, it's a word that carries a lot of history, a lot about our changing ideas of what it means to be civil and graceful. And it's not about being showy or pretentious. It's more about making interactions smoother, more pleasant, and maybe even more effective for everyone involved.
Okay, so here's something for you, our listener, to think about. In this world we live in now, so digital, so fast-paced, sometimes interactions feel really brief or impersonal. Do you think being urbane matters more, or maybe less? How could cultivating some of those urbane qualities, that effortless grace, putting people at ease, that blend of warmth and polish, actually help you in your own life, whether you're talking to someone face-to-face or typing online? What really stands out to you about this word urbane and how the qualities it describes have managed to stick around for so long?